Yeah.
So then we go to phonological dysgraphia.
Yeah, that's very common. That's the difficulty in using sound to spelling rules to spell. So the only way to test that is to give the person pseudo words, nonsense words to spell, because if you give them real words to spell, then they'll be able to spell those words by remembering the correct spelling of the whole word. They won't need to use the rules. So you have to force them to use the rules to see if they can. And so you've got to give them pseudo words or nonsense words to spell, like VIB. And so these people can spell real words quite well, but if you give them a nonsense word like VIB, they won't be able to do that. Now you might say, well, why is that important? Because we don't have to spell nonsense words, but we do. There are lots of cases where somebody asks me my name and I tell them my name and they've never heard that name before and they want to write it down so they can look me up on the internet. So they have to use rules to spell my name. And so we use rules for spelling much more often than you might think. Whenever you hear something whose spelling you haven't stored already and you want to write it down, you've got to use those rules. And in phonological dysgraphia, you can't use those rules. And so children who have phonological dysgraphia will be bad at spelling even the simplest pseudo words and nonsense words like VIB. And we shouldn't dismiss that because of the example I gave. That's a skill we need in adult life for spelling, being able to write down words that we've heard but haven't got a stored spelling for.
Right.
And so in treating such children, it's no use teaching them by rote to spell words because they already know how to do that. You've got to teach them the sound to spelling rules by teaching them to spell nonsense words. So they can't spell VIB. So you have to focus on what the sound of V is, how you write it down, that is written with a V. Focus on the sound to spelling rules. In other words, focus on what they can't do, because focusing on what they can do isn't going to help them with what they can't do.
Yeah, and I've noticed this also being a problem with a lot of students that are English as an additional language learners that come from a non-alphabetic language.
Yes. Children who come from whose language at home, for instance, isn't English, can still learn English very well when they're young because children's brains are very receptive to language. So learning a spoken language that's different from the one at home, if you're going to school, children do amazingly well there. And when you study such children who've been going to English-speaking schools when they're 6 or 7, they're fluent in speaking their home language and they're fluent in speaking their English. But if they come to school without much of a knowledge of English, so there's English as a second language, people whose actual spoken English isn't that good, that causes a whole bundle of problems with respect to learning to read and to spell. But it doesn't mean that this approach we're taking of trying to pin down which type of dysgraphia they have isn't still appropriate. Mm-hmm. And so we can still say, what type of dysgraphia does this child have? Even though we know the child has English as a second language, it doesn't rule out this approach, because if they're going to want to be fluent spellers in English, then they're going to have to learn sound to letter rules if that's their problem, or learn whole word spellings if that's their problem, or both, if both are their problems.
Right.